And then at the end of the study, all infected subjects, so all 10 people that had gotten infected with hookworm declined the anti-parasitic treatment. And then in the study, the authors say this is not an uncommon finding in helminth experiments. Yep. Okay, I just think about like my mom. My mom would be like, get these hookworms out of me immediately. Like for just regular people to be like, we're good.
Like,
we
we'll
don't
keep
want
them.
That's to me a huge testament.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, that says a lot. That's an important underscore. And that is, I've read other papers where you're like, yada, 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 reading the paper, and the very end, and it's like, everyone declined eradication. And I'm like, what?
What?
They
Yeah.
didn't want to get it out of them? That's crazy.
Your
But
face.
why? Were they just feeling better for some reason?
Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome to Influence to Death. I'm Victoria LaFont.
I'm Hannah Wright. And here we are.
Here we are. Actually, as we're just about to record, I'm like, I have an update. I'm going to change the whole design of our episode.
Are you serious?
Well, not design, but I do have an update on one of the past episodes on gluten. I think it's going to be the episode right before this one, episode number 30. We talked about the gluten cross-reactivity screening. I'm just going to say everybody knows the company. I think at this point, everybody in the comments is like, it's Cyrex. It's like, yes, it is. It's Cyrex Array 4. And it's the gluten cross-reactivity study that like a test that we covered last time. So when people are reactive to gluten, it's a pretty popular functional test that, gosh, it supposedly tests to see if you have reactivity not just to gluten, but also to like coffee, oats, whey. Protein is the one that maybe you want to tear my eyes out. So the only study that I could find that backed the validity of that test was this like very questionable in vitro animal study. So it was not even in the animals, if I remember correctly, and it was with rabbits. So I emailed Cyrex and I was like, hey, BT dubs, just
What is this?
curious, if there are any other studies that you have that back this. Customer service was very nice, but the studies that they sent were also very questionable. Like one was an article that Dr. Vajani, he is one of the authors of the study that we discussed, letter that he wrote, or article that he wrote for Townsend Letter, which is a popular integrative medicine, integrative wellness kind of sort of a very sciencey magazine, but it was an article, so there was no peer reviews. Actually, maybe for Townsend Letter there is some sort of peer review process, but it's not the same as for a published study.
And it was just like an editorial, like an opinion piece or an article, or it wasn't actually
it's an article. It's their articles that they publish. They're not like controlled studies.
Right.
But yeah, so an article that he wrote for them. But I think even when they publish articles, there has to be some amount of like peer-to-peer review. It's not peer review, but it is a form of peer review where someone else has to read the article and be like, hey, this person isn't batshit crazy. We like vouch for you. Because Sarah Russell has had an article published. She was actually on the cover of Townsend Letter. I have it somewhere here, her magazine.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, her issue of Townsend. So, but that doesn't prove the validity of a blood test.
Right.
And then there were a couple other studies that she included, but they were also in vitro. Nothing that where I was like, oh, okay, this totally makes sense. This was done in humans. It showed more positive outcomes with, some either like biochemical or, like symptom lessening, like something to show us. So the only kind of like piece of information that I'm curious about now that I don't have is like maybe clinicians run this and they see really good results.
Yeah. But also, I don't know. That's wild. I was kind of expecting they would have a little something more substantial to like back it up, and they don't. So they actually told you, they were like, this is what we have and that's what we have.
She was like, I just kind of looked around and I thought this would be helpful, and I was like, okay, do you know how much this costs for people to run?
It affects people's lives. That's crazy.
Yeah, and like I said, got even coffee, right? It's like people, give coffee a hard time, like the adenosine system and all. It's like I've just seen all these influencer videos lately about coffee, and it's like coffee is what it is. It's not going to give you like sustained lifelong resilience, but it's a lovely drink, and it's also very high in antioxidant.
It
They're
is. It's actually the main source, at least I think in the United States and maybe like Australia, of polyphenols in the diet. That's
yes,
how, like, because that's like the one thing that everybody drinks. Even if you go to
right.
McDonald's,
You can
their
get
coffee is
coffee.
going to have polyphenols in it, and polyphenols all their those compounds that are kind of like antioxidants, and they feed your good gut bacteria, and they turn
Hmm.
on genes, and
Yeah.
they're really cool, and we need them. So,
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
there are, that's the part that I usually come up against where I'm like, there are probably, helpful, nutrient rich, pleasurable. God forbid we lean on pleasure as a foundation of wellness, pleasurable foods that people might be cutting out. And maybe the only effect that they're having is placebo.
mhm.
I don't know. But yeah, the response from Cyrix was not enough to make me be like, oh, awesome.
That's
So
disappointing.
just wanted to
But
give that
that's
update.
important.
Yeah,
We
it's
need to talk about
important.
that. People need to know.
Tons of clinicians, like, I don't know if people kind of realize this, but this is interesting to know from kind of an insider's viewpoint. There's like different sects of integrative medicine. You kind of,
Mhm.
it's like Harry Potter. You get put into different houses. You either get put into like the biotics house, the apex energetics house, the thorn house, or, like,
And that's your tribe. That's who your loyalty
that's
remains
the
with
cell
them.
core house. That's the newest house, the Severin. Anyway, so, you get put into one of these houses, and people who went into the Apex house, that's a supplement company, had a lot of education that was like all of Apex supplements, and then Cyrix was kind of like the lab for Apex. Maybe I'm a little dated now because I haven't been in the clinical game for a few years, but the Krausian Vajani tribe.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of people in that ilk that have spent, probably, this is the crazy thing, they've probably spent as much money as we did getting a graduate degree going through the like Apex weekend webinars.
Right. Those are expensive.
They're really
So much
expensive.
money there.
Yeah. So, yeah, and Cyrix is so associated with them. I'm sure a ton of those clinicians are running those tests. It's questionable. So,
Business, man.
yeah. Anyway,
Man.
okay. None of that has anything to do with what we're going to talk about today, however. How are you doing with your cough? Do you want to
I'm okay. I might have to refill my tea. I've already drank all of my tea.
Do you want to
Since.
get more tea?
Can I get some more really quick?
Yeah, get more tea. I'm gonna check on my HVAC update because they're working on our air conditioners.
Cool. So where do we want to start? I guess we haven't even said what we're talking about.
Yeah, if you feel good, I won't, say it, and if not, then I'll.
To say what we're talking about.
Yeah, if not,
Oh,
I'll
okay.
bulldoze our way through it.
Okay, y'all. So today's episode, this is a subscriber episode. So today we're just going to have a fun conversation about dirt and germs. Are dirt and germs and worms actually bad for us? And we're going to talk about the old friends hypothesis, which is one of my favorite things ever. So
Yes.
here we go.
Yeah. So did I tell you about the old friends hypothesis? How did we learn about that?
I think at some point in grad school, I learned about it. Actually, the very first time I ever heard about like helmet therapy and this whole idea of us needing germs and dirt and things was, I think I listened to a Radiolab episode, which I put in the notes. It was all about parasites, but one of the people they were talking to was this guy from, I believe, from the United States who had like severe seasonal allergies, which I know I don't really have allergies, but I've met people who do, and I know it can be just like devastating. Like,
Debilitating.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was for him, it was like ruining his life. And he ended up contracting a parasite and his allergies went away completely. Anyways, it's a much more interesting and detailed than that, and a pretty wild story, but like I just thought it was incredible.
Radiolab is
Incredibly cool.
also so fun and good
It
to listen
is.
to.
Yes.
They
Podcast
actually have a
goals.
whole podcast on I can't pronounce the woman's name, the woman who formed Sci-Hub.
Ah,
Yeah, it's called the Library of Alexandria,
oh
I
my gosh.
believe. Here, let me double
So
check
cool.
myself. But that podcast is so fun to listen to.
Yeah, love that one. I love This American Life.
Yeah. Oh, the Library of Alexandra, because I think that
Alexandra.
is her first name.
Okay. She's a badass.
Alexandra Ibekian is the woman's name. Anyway,
Okay.
they have a podcast about her. But so I think I learned about this hypothesis because I used to, well, I think you wrote a couple of them. The articles for Health Means, like these like huge, like 3,500 word articles that we would get hired to write. And they were like heavily cited. I mean, it would take
Mhm.
like days and days and days of research. And so there was one on parasites. And I think I happened upon this guy, the guy who came up with the hypothesis, Graham Rook, because I was in the middle of like, the fever dream of writing one of those articles, which, we got paid like beans for. At the end of the day, it was like hours of time, but it changed my life. And then every person in my life, I was like, hey, have you ever heard of this hypothesis? And they're like, no, freak, we're just trying to like have a beer with you. Please
But it's
stop.
so cool.
It's
This is so cool. And the
Yeah.
paper that he shared with us, because actually Victoria emailed him and she talked to him about coming on, but he's essentially, I guess, retired now.
Yeah, I think he's
Um,
retired. This whole episode though came about, Hannah, because of you. I think because you were like, let's do one on the hygiene hypothesis.
mhm.
And I was like, what about old friends?
Yes.